Hello, my name is Ash and I like to draw, but do you know what else I like? Superheroes! And making sequels to videos I made like a year ago. Oops. Okay, time for a brief recap. Back in the 60s, DC Comics introduced Dial H for Hero, a series about a device called the H-Dial that would turn its user into a new, entirely random superhero every time a specific number was dialed, with other dials like a villain dial and so forth being introduced later down the line. In the decades since, Dial H has featured literally hundreds of wonderfully weird one-shot superheroes and villains. Some were even submitted by readers at the time for a bit of interactivity. And I thought to myself, what would happen if I took a list of every name of every hero and villain that the dials have summoned through the decades and tried to design my own characters based only on those names? So, that's what I did. I rolled a random name, threw some ideas around, and ended up with 5 heroes of my own, not even checking what the original looked like until I was done, at which point I then compared them side by side to see if I could top the original idea. The result was this group of 5 characters that, honestly, I'm still pretty happy with. And if you're curious about the process, go ahead and watch that old video. But I think I can do it again, and I think I can do it better. So buckle up, boys, girls, outliers, and in-betweens. It's time once again to dial H for Hero. The first name on our list is Distortionex. Okay, so we all agree that's a villain name, right? Like, there's not even any debate. That just sounds as much like a villain name as anything possibly could. Oh, turns out it is. Well, there you go then. So, looking up distortion in the dictionary for ideas is defined as the act of twisting or altering something out of its true natural or original state. Or, in terms of tech, falsified reproduction of an audio or video signal. The first thing that probably comes to mind for most people when they hear this is music, like distortion on an electric guitar. And I have to admit that's what I thought at first as well. But then I thought, what if this guy doesn't just distort sound or video, but reality itself? Have you ever seen a video game glitch? Especially one from the older 8 to 16-bit days? You know, the way that things start overlapping, characters melt into walls or floors, strange textures appear on the tiles. Imagine how terrifying it would be to fight someone who can project a field that turns reality into a total jumbled, glitchy mess. That was the whole idea behind this character, and I thought it would work best if I made him look weird and alien. So I packed him in a full bodysuit that might make him immune to his own power, or at least be able to perceive properly through it. Like, maybe he doesn't even really control the glitches, he's just able to actually move through them. I also made him thin and gangly and gave him a weird zombie-like gait, just to make him more unsettling. This guy definitely can't throw a punch to save his life. But would he really need to if you can't even tell up from down while you're fighting him? So since he kinda messes with the world around the hero, he's kinda similar to Scarecrow from Batman, with a whole lot of Screenslaver from The Incredibles 2 thrown in. I absolutely loved how scary Screenslaver looks when standing amidst all the staticky screens, and I thought I'd take it a step further by giving him antennae and an old-time radio speaker mouth. I want him to talk like he's speaking through old, barely functioning equipment, all while the world fragments and glitches around you. So, with a bit of static and some messy electricity, we have created our reality glitching supervillain, Distortionex. I'm very happy with him. I can imagine him making a really spine-chilling entrance to an unprepared hero. But now we're getting to the really fun part. Let's take a look at what Distortionex actually looked like in the original Dial H for Hero comics. Distortionex debuted in 1982 in Adventure Comics 489, in a story written by Rob Rosakis and drawn by Carmine Infantino, and, you know, I don't hate this. It's certainly more colorful than mine. The skirt is throwing me off a little bit, but I really like the weird visor and the red on grey color scheme. And given he was invented by a 14-year-old, the idea of a dude named Distortionex who has a matter disintegrating touch power is kind of rad. I wish I could have come up with anything half as cool when I was 14. I think mine is a more interesting modern take on the idea, especially in terms of powers, but damn, good job there, Rob. I mean, I know you're like 58 nowadays or something, but just know that this random YouTuber thinks you made something pretty cool back when you were 14. Alright, time for our second roll, and this time we've got Dragonfly. Okay, so here's a quick little detail about my process of making these characters that I didn't mention before. When I first found this list, I went through it and removed some names. Mostly names that were exactly the same as or too similar to heroes I was already familiar with. I did this to avoid being influenced too much and to really allow my mind to run free, but there is actually one superhero out there I know of called Dragonfly. The thing is, he's a parody character, more specifically of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, created in the scary movie-adjacent era of parody films, despite not really being related to them. He's basically just Peter Parker but green with no webs as I remember him. I don't really think he counts, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway, because I'm gonna take it in a completely different direction. So, dragonflies are known primarily for two things visually. Their large wings and that long tail. And for some reason, that made me think of creating a powered armor hero. Which is gonna be really fun because I suck at drawing armor. Oh boy. Insects just lend themselves really well to armor designs given that they themselves have segmented bodies and various plates. Just look at how many armored versions of Spider-Man exist, or check out characters like Beetle. Knowing this, I went for a sort of Beetle Iron Man-esque design with a full helmet. Big bug eyes rarely work well with outfits where the mouth is exposed anyway, so we're gonna make it a full green suit with a giant golden dragonfly logo stretched over it. In my language, dragonfly is actually guldsmed, which translates to goldsmith, so it's not like I pulled this completely out of nowhere. I also had this idea of giving him a jetpack that has the long tail, possibly an extendable one. I'm sure we can make up some nonsense about why it's better for the exhaust to be so narrow, or maybe he can use it to shoot projectiles from behind? I mean, hey, it worked for Astro Boy. I kind of imagine this guy as wanting to be a very classical hero, and having had an easy go of it so far. He's someone who hasn't been challenged much yet, someone who's adored by the public, someone who is living the highs of the superhero life, and someone who will crash and burn hard once he experiences some of the lows. I don't really know why, but there's just something about this guy that makes me want to see what happens when he falls. Writers are terrible people sometimes. In any case, I may not be the greatest at drawing armor, but I do think I ended up with a pretty decent take on a Dragonfly-themed superhero here. He certainly looks ready for action. Now let's take a look at what he was like back in the old days. For this one, we gotta go back a few issues to Adventure Comics 482, still drawn by Carmine Infantino, but this time written by comics legend Mark Wolfman. And wow, we really went in totally opposite color directions, huh? It's a little too Spider-Man adjacent to my liking, but I actually rather like the lines across his body. The symbol on the chest is weird though. That looks like a worm on a hook during a fishing trip to me more than it looks like anything else. It's pretty old school and I like me some old school, but I think I'm a little bit more partial to my version in this case. Alright, next up is Power Punch. Well, that's quite a name. Where am I even supposed to go with that? Alright, I'm gonna get really specific with my inspiration for this one, because when I hear a term like Power Punch, I think back to being a kid and playing Tekken 3. Back then, Paul's Power Punch move was like one of those maybe 5 special moves that every kid knew how to do. So sometimes me and my friend would both pick Paul, or Roger and Alex if we were playing Tekken 2, input the combination at the same time, and then just see who got hit first. And of course we'd cheer like crazy when it happened at the same time. Yeah, we made our own fun back then. But that made me think. What if there was a hero whose only power was having one incredibly powerful part? No, not like that! I then started thinking about how many characters out there lose an arm and have it replaced with some kind of badass robot arm, like, say, Winter Soldier, but that felt a little bit too basic. I wanted something a bit more out of the ordinary. You know that trope of people who are given their powers by someone else? You know, like Green Lantern, Shazam, Deku from My Hero Academia, those types of characters? Well, what if we had somebody who was gifted their powers as a reward by somebody who's really bad at giving out rewards? So I started thinking about who would be the most devastated to lose an arm, and I landed on a boxer. And that led to this idea of a former boxer who maybe rescues an alien from a crash site or something, but loses his arm in the process and is given a new one instead, by an alien who barely understands how humans actually work. So instead of a sleek, badass, flexible metal hand like everyone else gets, he gets this huge, clunky, almost construction vehicle-like piston or hole punch hand that he can barely lock around. He can still turn it at his shoulder to a certain degree, but it takes time to aim, charge up and fire, so it's very situational. But hits absurdly hard when it does hit. Of course, our guy would need some level of super strength to carry the damn thing, and I imagine he'd be able to find other ways to use it too. Like maybe if he aims it at the floor, he can use it to send himself flying for a bit more mobility. And he is still a former boxer, so he's not completely without any other skills. I just really like the idea of somebody who tried to do the right thing, was rewarded with a superpower that borders on being a straight up disability, but still tries to do the best he can with what he was given. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a badass hero to me. Since I went with this idea that the arm should look like a construction vehicle, I figured it almost had to be yellow, so I decided to make that his main color scheme. And once I decided that he was also going to be black, I gave him similar colors to those of Luke Cage's old Power Man costume from when he first showed up in the comics in the 70s. And honestly, the boxing equipment kinda makes him look a little bit like a gladiator, and I feel like that really suits him. So yeah, here's our final take on Power Punch. He's completely freaking ridiculous, but that's kind of what I love about him. And now let's take a look at the original Power Punch. Once again, we're back in 1982, and we find Power Punch in New Adventures of Superboy number 31 and 32, written by Bob Rozakis and drawn by Howard Bender. And I don't know what I'm looking at here. What, is Batroc the Leaper having an edgy face? I mean, it's not exactly terrible, and we seem to have the same basic idea of multi-purpose punches, but this one just feels kind of random to me. And I don't know about you, but if I was going out to fight bad guys, I'd be careful about outlining my junk like that. You might as well paint a bullseye on it. I'm gonna be a jerk and give myself the win on this one. I mean, you can call him derivative of Power Man and you'd probably be right, but I think mine at least has a little bit more visual interest. One more roll, and this time we land on Dr. Cyclops. Alright, once again that name just screams supervillain to me. I mean, what hero uses doctor in their name, right? Okay, yeah, but... I'm sorry, who? Okay, so obviously this is another case of a name I probably should have removed because anyone reading it is gonna think of Cyclops from the X-Men right away, but I felt like the Doctor separated it just enough to be its own thing. I thought of trying to base a power set entirely around having one eye, and I had this mental image of a person who, kind of like Cyclops, had a visor on their head, but one that had a round robotic eyeball attached to it. But then I got more grotesque with it and thought, what if we took that visor and made it go all the way around the head and fully replaced the person's eyes and ears? It seemed like a perfect thing for some kind of mad scientist to do. And when I thought about how that would require shaving your temples and having short hair, I thought of that shaved pixie cut you see on some women. So, Dr. Cyclops quickly became a female mad scientist. Now there is this tendency in comic books to make the female villains more sympathetic than the male ones. To make them just be misunderstood and really just be in need of somebody who will listen. And I say to hell with that! In my head, this character is completely and utterly self-centered and giddy about it. Kind of like Lord Dominator from Wander Over Yonder. Even if she doesn't consider herself evil exactly. I came up with this whole backstory of how she was born blind but given an experimental visor by her father to give her some limited vision. And then, growing older and showing great intelligence herself, she just kept improving upon it until it became what she has now. A circular camera that can spin around her whole head, see all wavelengths, zoom in, record everything, and yes, shoot lasers. I mean, a girl's gotta be able to defend herself. Naturally, an incredible invention like this earns her a lot of praise from her father. But spending a whole childhood being told that her lack of vision and her intelligence made her more special than anyone else just started feeding into her narcissism. Curing her sight is not enough, and even thinking of curing anyone else's sight doesn't even cross her mind. Instead, she just wants to see more, and keep improving her own vision. Because in her mind, the better her visor is, the more special she is. And eventually, this develops straight into building eyeball-shaped robots that she wants to spread all over the world so that she will always see everything. And become the ultimate voyeur. And ironically, she's completely blind to why this is wrong of her to do. After all, she doesn't want to take over the world or anything. She just wants to be able to observe it and react however she pleases to whatever she sees. And what's so wrong about that? Just imagine this. A completely self-absorbed, narcissistic young woman who never grew out of being daddy's extra special girl, commanding armies of eyeball-shaped robots of all sizes, who can see everything, record anything she sees, and is utterly incapable of realizing how much good she could do if she tried, making her not really that much different from her father, who only focused on his own child. That, my dear viewers, makes for a hell of a villain in my book. But why don't we stop for a second and take a look at what Dr. Cyclops was actually like back in the comics. Sure enough, Dr. Cyclops was indeed a villain first, featured in 1967 in House of Mystery number 164, written by Dave Wood and drawn by Jim Mooney. And he's an old one-eyed guy in red pajamas with an eye symbol. Boy, they really didn't put much thought into this one, did they? I like the weird three-part hairdo though. It's silly, but it draws the eye, so to speak. His gimmick is apparently that he uses different visors with different properties, so we certainly had a similar base idea for vision-based power. Mine just packs it all in one more convenient, constantly upgraded package. I don't know. This guy is fun in a very pulp kind of way, but I think through a modern lens, mine wins out in this case. But I'll let you be the judge. And that leads us to the final character design for this video, which is one I actually did live on stream. Worm Man? Worm Man. Okay, you know what? It wouldn't be a challenge if there wasn't a joke or two in the bunch, so I'm doing it. I'm drawing Worm Man. This just had to be the one I rolled live on stream too, didn't it? So, anyway, fun fact. There actually is an official worm-themed villain in DC Comics called Tapeworm, and he's about as lame and gross as the name implies. But I didn't want to just give a guy a long worm tail and call it a day. So I started imagining a person who burrows through the ground or other matter by essentially eating it, in a slightly unusual way. I thought about other worm-themed characters and landed on Maggot from the X-Men, who has a pair of robotic-looking flying maggots in place of a digestive system who convert the matter they eat into energy for him to use. But I thought, what if we had a guy who had something similar that just couldn't detach? So I came up with the idea of replacing a man's midsection with a whole extendable worm body and treat the whole thing like some manner of weapon/life support machine, grafted onto him by some kind of mad scientist. So I gave him these sharp claws that can dig through almost anything and suck up any debris and put it into this huge tank on his back so he can convert it all into energy. Energy that then gives him super strength on top of his sharp claws and extendable midsection that he can use to constrict or quickly ram into people with. So basically this guy has to burrow through things to survive, and I like to think that this is how whoever created him can control him too, because, hey, they can just turn off his life support system whenever they want. So yeah, if you can't tell, I'm going for a villain here. A classic case of some kind of low-rent thug who gets messed up and built into a supervillain against his will. And probably gets a lame name like Worm Man against his will too, even though he's actually pretty strong. I decided to really lean into the whole life support idea, so I gave him some wires and a sickly skin tone to go with it. I almost gave each segment of his worm stomach some grabby legs too, like a centipede, but those aren't worms in the strict sense of the word, so I dropped it. And the end result is actually surprisingly terrifying considering the lame prompt we started with. Damn. So honestly, I kinda think I cooked with this one, but let's see what the original comics were cooking back in the day. Once again, we're back in the early 1980s with Adventure Comics 490, written by E. Nilsson Bridwell and drawn yet again by Carmine Infantino. Why does he have a cape? Why does he have a cape? No, I'm serious here. Why is he just a random generic superhero with a worm tail, and why does he have a cape? And just to add insult to injury, he's on like one page and only exists to dig our protagonist out of a holding cell. Yeah, I'm sorry, Robbie. I think everybody kind of fumbled this one. Not that mine is the peak of originality, but it's certainly a bit more visually interesting than whatever this is. And that will be that for today, folks. We got 5 prompts and we came up with 5 characters. We actually ended up with more villains than heroes this time, and honestly, I'm pretty happy with what I got. I set out to get wilder and more imaginative with my designs than I did in the last video, and I like to think I succeeded. But I care more about what you think. Which one of these characters was your favorite? Would you like to see them in a comic book? And what would you have done if you rolled a random name from this list? Tell me all about it in the comments below, and don't forget to click the like and the hype button and subscribe to the channel to see more art videos in the future. I'll see you when another one drops, folks. Bye for now.